All right, let's dive into the life of a truly pivotal figure from 20th century India, someone you may not have heard of, but whose impact is undeniable. Periyar E.V. Ramasamy. His story is just fascinating. It's the story of a vintage rebel, a man whose incredibly long crusade for social dignity kicked off in a completely different era, but whose ideas, you'll see, are still making waves today.
And just so you know where all this is coming from, everything we're about to unpack is pulled directly from his collected works. So we're getting this straight from the source, right from his own life and his own words.
And wow, this quote, it just cuts right to the heart of everything he was about. For Periyar, it all boiled down to one single powerful idea: self-respect. It wasn't just a nice to have, it was the absolute foundation for a life worth living and for any kind of just society.
So you have to ask, where did this intense, lifelong conviction come from? Well, to understand that, we've got to go way back to his early days. It turns out one single event would light the fuse that turned the son of a wealthy merchant into a full-blown revolutionary.
So Periyar was born way back in 1879. His family was well-off, religious, very comfortable. But even as a kid, he was that guy who was always asking why, constantly poking holes in the religious stories he was told. This questioning nature eventually led to a huge blow-up. In 1904, his father reprimanded him, and Periyar's reaction was, well, it was extreme. He renounced his entire family and just took off on a pilgrimage.
His journey eventually led him to Kashi, what we now know as Varanasi, one of the holiest cities in Hinduism. He showed up looking for some kind of spiritual truth, but what he found instead was going to change his life forever.
Imagine this. He's completely broke and literally starving. He goes to a sholtri, which is basically a free food hall for pilgrims. But they stop him right at the door and turn him away. Why? Because he wasn't a Brahmin, the highest caste. The food was only for them. And we're not talking about a polite, "No, sorry." The source makes it clear he was rudely, physically pushed out into the street. The hunger was so bad that he was reduced to picking up discarded scraps of food from the ground, literally competing with stray dogs for leftovers. I mean, can you imagine the humiliation?
And here's the kicker. This is the moment that turns that humiliation into pure rage. While he's eating off the street, he looks up and sees an inscription on the wall of the sholtri. It says the whole place, the place that exclusively fed Brahminans, was funded by a wealthy merchant from the Dravidian south, a man just like him.
Yep, this was it. This was the spark. The source calls it a deep wound that inflamed intense hatred. The absolute hypocrisy of it all. His own people's money was being used to create a system that treated him worse than an animal. That single moment set him on a rebel path that he would walk for the rest of his very long life.
Okay, so that awakening, it basically catapulted Periyar into the world of politics. He took all that anger and decided to channel it into action. At first, trying to change the system from the inside by joining the big independence movement. And when I say he jumped in, I mean he really jumped in. Get this. To join Gandhi's non-cooperation movement back in 1920, Periyar resigned from 29 public offices. 29! That included being the chairman of his own town. He gave up a huge amount of power and status for the cause.
And it didn't take long for him to make some serious waves. In 1924, he was leading a major protest in a town called Vaikom. The goal was simple but radical: to get the basic human right for people deemed untouchable to just walk on the public streets near a temple. He was arrested over and over, and his bravery there earned him a new name: Hero of Vaikom.
But this is where a deep, fundamental crack started to show. You see, for the Indian National Congress and leaders like Gandhi, the #1 goal was political freedom from the British. But for Periyar, that wasn't enough. He believed that political freedom was totally meaningless if you didn't have social freedom first. He argued, what's the point of being free from the British if you're still enslaved by the caste system?
For 5 years straight, at every big party meeting, Periyar would introduce resolutions demanding fair representation for non-Brahmins, and every single time they were blocked. By 1925, he'd had enough. He was completely disillusioned, so he walked out of the party for good, determined to do things his own way.
And that new path he forged, it became his life's greatest work. He didn't just walk away from a political party. He started a full-blown social revolution, one that would carry his name and his radical ideas for the next 50 years.
He called it, fittingly, the self-respect movement. And the mission was as simple as it was profound: wake people up to their own inherent dignity,
tear down the caste system, and champion rational thinking over what he saw as blinding superstition.
And Periyar, he was not one to mince words. He was crystal clear about what he saw as the roadblocks to self-respect. He identified these 5 things: God, religion, the Congress Party, Gandhi, and the Brahminical system as the key pillars holding up a society that denied people their basic dignity. He was never afraid to name his targets.
This quote just nails his whole philosophy, doesn't it? He saw political freedom as an empty shell if you didn't have dignity. He believed true liberation had to start on the inside, with each person reclaiming their own sense of self-worth.
So what did this movement actually do? Well, its agenda was, wow, it was so far ahead of its time. It wasn't just talk. They promoted self-respect marriages without priests or religious rituals. They fought for women's rights to divorce and to own property. We're talking decades before this was mainstream. And they pushed for the priesthood to be a job anyone could have, not something you were born into. Truly revolutionary stuff.
So, after this long, decades-long fight, what was the result? Well, the impact of Periyar's crusade wasn't just an idea. It was real, it was concrete, and it ended up changing the actual laws and social fabric of India.
This right here, this might be his single greatest political win. When the new Indian Constitution was written, it threatened to undo the reservation policies he'd fought so hard for. So Periyar launched a massive, statewide protest. The pressure was so intense that in 1951, the government passed the very first amendment to its brand new constitution, specifically to protect affirmative action in schools and jobs, a policy that's still in place today.
And it wasn't just in India. By the end of his long life, the whole world was taking notice. In 1970, UNESCO gave him this incredible citation, calling him the Socrates of Southeast Asia and the arch enemy of ignorance. Talk about global recognition for a lifetime of fighting the good fight.
And all that leaves us with one final thought. Periyar's journey began with a moment of deep personal humiliation over 100 years ago. And yet, his ideas about caste, about rationalism, about social justice, they feel more relevant now than ever. So the question is, how does the long echo of this vintage rebel's voice still challenge and shape our world today?